As we all know, the TC Pro has been the standard for big wall climbing, crack climbing, basically anything in Yosemite. Needless to say, these have been the standard for a while. But then SCARPA kind of comes into the mix with these. This is the SCARPA Generator Mid, and this is what SCARPA is offering to kind of compete with the TC Pro. And I think it might be the better version. What do I mean by that? Well, it seems to me that this shoe just has a little bit more features that make it a little bit more comfortable for the wearer. And just right off the gate, there's a big difference in padding between these two shoes. Like the TC Pro is a high top. It's meant to give you ankle protection, and it's just meant for some of those nasty off-width cracks that you have to deal with, where you just have to jam your foot in and you just gotta jam. But just having these two shoes, there is a big difference in padding. The SCARPA Generator Mid has a full-on like neoprene and foam padding in the ankle, and it feels way better than the TC Pro. It makes the TC Pro feel like the padding is just paper. Like this feels like an actual padded shoe and protective shoe. And using the shoe would give me more confidence for those nasty off-widths. Like if it was like a jagged granite crack, I'd have no problem shoving my ankle into that crack and jamming in these shoes. These ones, a little questionable. And that's kind of the common theme, is that there's just more with this. Like, it's a pretty well known that the tongue is a problem on the TC Pro. It kind of folds into itself. It's kind of janky, it's thin, it's weird. Like it doesn't sit right all the time. And even with this updated model, Sportiva was trying to fix that problem, and they didn't really fix it all the way. It's still a problem. Whereas the tongue on the SCARPA Generator Mid, it's wide, it's thick, and you don't have the same problems, which is really nice, because that's one thing that drives me nuts about the TC Pros, is that if you don't get that tongue right, it kind of curls on itself. And that is just, it's a pain in the butt. I mean, that's the last thing you want to be adjusting when you have the shoe all the way laced up. Whereas this one, like you get your foot in, the tongue's not a problem, and it's just secure. Not to mention that there's also padding in the tongue as well. You really do get like full coverage padding with this shoe compared to a very thin tongue on the TC Pro. Okay, so when you take all that away, how does the shoe perform over the TC Pro? Well, at the end of the day, they're still kind of the all-rounder shoe. I will say that the SCARPA Generator Mid probably has a slight edge just because it's got a slightly more aggressive toe. It's kind of like the same toe that you'd find in the Katana, where it's still an all-day shoe, but there's just a little bit more downturn where you can get a little bit more confidence on overhanging terrain, versus the TC Pro, which is pretty much a flat shoe. Like it's flat out of the box, there's no downturn, and it's a comfort shoe. I mean, this is a shoe that you'd want to do a lot of smearing on granite big walls. Like it's the Yosemite shoe, it's the Bugaboo shoe, it's just the shoe for granite. But I feel like the Generator Mid kind of, like I said, just outperforms it a little bit more just because of the slightly more downturn toe. I think there's more you can do with this. And speaking of that, they are the same rubber compound. They're both Vibram XS Edge, and it's a full outsole of Vibram XS Edge, which means that the shoe is pretty stiff. So you're definitely going to have decent support with both of these. And of course, they do fit a little bit differently. SCARPA shoes tend to fit way differently than La Sportiva shoes. You cannot really use the same size that you do with a La Sportiva shoe with a SCARPA shoe. I mean, these two are very different. This is a very downsized TC Pro, and it feels roomy and comfortable for all day objectives, whereas the SCARPA shoe is like a 1.5 downsize, and it feels tight. It's very tight, and there's just a big difference between the lasting systems, and that should be obvious. Like it's two different shoe manufacturers, and lasting is different. But I will say is that La Sportiva is generally on the lower volume side. If you have lower volume foot, you're probably going to like La Sportiva's last a little bit more. You can kind of see that the toes aren't very high and it's pretty flat. Whereas the SCARPA has more volume overall. Kind of see with the higher kind of toe box profile, there is more room, which if you have higher volume feet, that's great. But if you kind of don't, it leads to some interesting effects where like if you slide your feet in and if you don't get your toes just right, your toes kind of fold on themselves. It's kind of weird. Doesn't feel great, and it can take some time to get used to. But once you kind of get past that, they feel really good, And having that little bit more room in the toe box is actually kind of nice for a little bit longer days, because then when your toes swell, there's a little bit more room in the toe box for your kind of feet to expand. Whereas when my feet are swelling in the TC Pros, it hurts because they are tight. But that is probably mostly due just to the downsides that I did with them. And because we talked about the toe box, we should probably talk about the heel. There is a big difference with the heel. The heel in the TC Pro is kind of La Sportiva's old style of heel. And what do I mean by that? It means that the heel cup is a little bit farther back from the rand, and sometimes this rand will just cut into your Achilles and it hurts a lot. Whereas the SCARPA has this more kind of better style heel where it's just kind of straight down and your heel cup kind of goes right in the same spot and there's no problems whatsoever. I guess overall, time will tell if the SCARPA Generator Mid is really going to be the new king for crack climbing and face climbing and big wall climbing. Like, there is definitely a legacy with the TC Pro. It still is a great performing shoe, but just to see this shoe come out from SCARPA, it really does kind of push the limits of what a big wall shoe can be. And I think this is kind of going to be the standard going forward. It'll definitely be interesting to see if La Sportiva kind of responds to this and then kind of redesign the TC Pro. Because realistically, this last update, it was just an aesthetics update. It didn't change a whole lot. So with the SCARPA Generator Mid out now, it will definitely be interesting to see what La Sportiva does.